وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عم يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون. كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون. ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وهاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وأفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. والحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا نحمده ونشكره ونستهديه ونستغفره ونستعيذ به من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل الله فلا هادي له. Brothers and sisters, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us what's best in this dunya and the highest of statuses and level in the day of judgment. إنه سميع مجيب. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Of the words of Al-Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi that he mentions in the chart of rights. Because as we know, at the time of Al-Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he didn't have the freedom to speak freely or to preach and spread the knowledge freely after the tragedy of Karbala and what happened in Medina after that of the wars like Waqi'atul Harra, for example. It's where when we mentioned in the end of Ashura, the 13 nights, we mentioned the situation of the Medina and what happened after the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, where Bani Umayyah were fighting amongst each other in order to take the Khilafah, and attacks started to happen on the Medina. The sanctity of the Medina of the Prophet salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi was breached, and even the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was disrespected, where the soldiers who attacked the Medina, they put their horses inside the masjid until these horses dropped feces in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, one of the ways that he kept the religion intact is by holding the majalis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, for example. For example, the supplications and the munajat and the dua that he wrote and he taught the people, like dua Abu Hamza al-Thumali, like what we have in Sahif al-Sajjadiyah. And through these dua, he teaches the people tawheed. He teaches the people the etiquette of dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He teaches the people how do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the treasures that he left for us is the chart of rights, where it teaches us not first after he mentions the right of Allah, he teaches us the right of everything else, the right of yourself, starting with your limbs, with your body, and then the right of your teacher, the right of your parents, the right of the child upon the father. All these rights that will build a healthy social life, which will give a person a healthy life, a happy life, a life that is full of tranquility and being at ease. But tonight I chose to speak about the first right that Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi speaks about, which is the right of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And in what he mentions, the Imam mentions 5 points. He says the greatest right of Allah against you is that you worship Him without associating anything with Him. And when you do that with sincerity, with ikhlas, He has made it binding upon Himself, to give you sufficiency in the affairs of this world and in the hereafter and in the next world. So here are 5 points. I divided the words of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. First, what is the meaning of the right of Allah? Why did the Imam call it a right, a haqq? Because when we say it's your right upon me, it doesn't have to be under a religious conditions or like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to tell me about to give the right of the people. It's something that makes common sense. It's a common sense. It just makes sense. It's something that is intellectually and logically, I have to give it back to its people. When I say it's your right as a human being is to be respected. Your right as a human being that what you have, the freedom that you have in doing what you want, it's not supposed to be disrespected as long as it doesn't trespass to the freedom of other people. So you have a certain kind of respect that I have to give that to you. It's your right upon me for you to feel safe around me. The right, for example, of the child upon the father. When I choose to build a family and I bring a child to this world, the right of the child upon me is to feed it, is to clean it, is to provide for this baby what this baby cannot provide for itself. So that's why the Imam calls it a right. So what is the meaning of the right of Allah? And then the second point, he says that the right of Allah is worshipping Him. And the third point is not to associate anyone in my worships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the fourth point is to worship Him with ikhlas, sincerity. And then the fifth point is the fruit. When you worship Allah and you do not associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you do that with sincerity, what happens? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you? And this answers a lot of questions, inshallah, throughout the talk. We will see how worshipping Allah is something that it doesn't have to be mentioned in the Quran or the Hadith so we can obey it. It's something that is logical. It's something that is common sense. Something that even a person who's not a Muslim realizes that it's supposed to happen. We will mention these 5 points after Salat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. So why did Imam Zayn al-Abidin call it a right? The right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned briefly before in the beginning that the same way when I bring a child to this life, I have to give it its right, it's common sense. So how does it make sense for a person who's not even a Muslim to give the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It is mentioned in the books of theology when we learn about why is it important, why is it a must to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the logical evidences that we use is something that is called لزوم شكر المنعم. That means that it's a must for you to show gratitude to the person who gives you, or the person who does good by your side, or the person who is good to you, someone who gives you, like, does a favor to you. The common sense thing to do, and what makes sense and what is logical, what makes you a person of morals, what makes you a person that people, they wouldn't mind to, for example, do certain business with you, or like do a social relationship with you, is that when you have these morals, when you show gratitude to the person who does good to you. The simplest thing is to say thank you. Alaykum Assalam wa rahmatullah. So this evidence, to summarize it, they say that it's common sense to show gratitude to the giver. Luzum, it's a must. Logically, a must to be grateful to the giver. And if we want to understand this in a better way, and we will notice that the way I show gratitude becomes different depending on the quality and the quantity of the grace that you received and the status of the giver. And to understand that, we give 2 examples. We have 2 scenarios that they mention, and I always mention on the minbar when we speak about this, that imagine that you are in the middle of the desert and it's too hot and you're about to die of thirst. You know, there is no water around you, and a passerby just comes on a convoy or driving his car or whatever, and he offers you a very cold cup of water. Here, how do you show your gratitude to this person? Even if he's a stranger, even if he is your enemy, because now you owe him your life. He saved your life. You were about to die of thirst. The way you show him gratitude here is different. You will thank him in a way that this person saved your life. So here, the quantity and the quality of gratefulness is what? Is depending on what you received means in this case. It means to you, your life. So, but if you were sitting at home and you're not even thirsty and someone gives you a cup of water, you will drink it, you will take it out of respect to the person. He did the effort and he brought me a cup of water. I will show gratefulness, but not the same way. This is the first scenario. The second scenario that we can imagine in order to understand the second part of Luzum Shukr al-Mun'im is that imagine your father comes to you and brings you a cup of water. Here in this case, even if you're not thirsty, even if you do not want water, what you do is that you stand up, you tell your father, or like someone that you respect, you tell him, thank you, I'm the one who's supposed to serve you. You are my parent, you are my father, and I am your son. Out of respect, I'm supposed to stand up and not to allow you to do this effort for me, and you see it's something great that my father is serving me, so you thank him in a different way, the status of the giver. But in another case, if your younger brother brings you a cup of water, you might take that cup and give him a punch on the face, and you might slap him, and that's it. And you don't even say thank you. So the status of the giver as well makes a difference. The way I show gratitude differs depending on the quality and the quantity of what you received and the status of the giver. In the case of your creator, in the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I look around me that this universe He created for me. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, that we will show them our signs in the horizon and in themselves. When I look at this hand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me in order to be able to make money through this hand, I work hard using my hands. I walk and I move myself from a position to another using my feet. And then the water, the breathe. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that Badi'un Ni'am, the first grace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you is that He created you in this world. He gave you a chance. He gave you a life that you can enjoy the sweetness of this dunya. The pleasures of the dunya. So first I look at the grace that I received. It's something that no one else can give me. No one else. And I look at the giver. Who's the giver? The giver who gives me something that it doesn't harm him and it doesn't benefit him if he gives it to me, and at the same time he's still giving it to me and I'm committing sins. Someone is qawi, the strong, the ghani, who's not needy of me. He doesn't need me. Ya ayyuhan nas antumul fuqara ila Allah wallahu wal ghani. You are the one, all people, you are the ones who are in need of Allah, and Allah is the one who doesn't need you. Allahu al ghani. So we look here, the quantity of the grace we cannot count it. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you sit down your whole life to count the graces of Allah, you won't be able to count it. The grace is uncountable. The quality of it is so great. No one can give me a nose to breathe with. No one is able to fix my lungs if they are destroyed. Even if I go to the doctors and take a medicine, they will make it better a bit. But it's not the same as how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to me. No one else is able to. So how do I show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's why the Imam calls it's the right of Allah. It's something that you see, if you do not do it, if you do not show gratefulness or gratitude to a person that does good to you, if a person doesn't show gratitude to what you do to him, then you will look at this person, he's rude. I will start warning the people of this person. This person, no matter maybe he doesn't deserve any kind of goodness. But you accept that you will get upset if people do not show gratitude to you, and you do not care if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets upset and punishes for those who doesn't worship Him and who doesn't show gratitude to Allah. So how do I show gratitude? The Imam says that the right of Allah is what? Is أَنَّكَ تَعْبُدُهُ وَلَا تُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا. To worship Him. The ibadah. Because when I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's something that He wants. I want the gratitude for, especially between husband and wife. What I do, I need something that is equivalent to it. The sacrifices that I do, I'm supposed to receive something in return. I want something that would make me satisfied. So I would ask something that is equivalent to my efforts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, same thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that I want you to worship me the way I want. The shaitan, when he prostrated to Allah for 6,000 years, or when Allah told him, I want you to prostrate for Adam, he refused. He said, I will worship you in a way that no one else will worship you, even the angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, doesn't matter. I want you to do one sajda for Adam, even if it's going to take a second. It's better than all the 6,000 years that you've done in front of the door of heaven. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to worship Him the way He wants. What is the ibadah? We mentioned this after Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ibadah is not only as we imagine, it's the actions that we do. It's the prayers and fasting and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us it's a must upon you to do. Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wasalam alayhi, when he was asked about the truth of the ibadah, he said it's three things. And on the third point, that's where he mentions your duties, as in prayers and fasting. He says the first thing, that the abd, the worshipper and the servant of Allah, he doesn't see that what Allah gave him in the dunya is something that he owns. A lot of time, even people who believe in Allah, who are religious, They believe that Allah owns everything, but they think that we are in partnership with this, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is my partner in owning my money. In fact, the Amir al-Mu'minin explains that. He says, إِنَّا لَا نَمْلِكُ مَعَ اللَّهِ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى شَيْئًا. We don't own anything with Allah. We are not in partnership with Allah in when it comes to what we own. He says what we have is what He gives us, because whenever He gives us something, He's putting upon our shoulders a responsibility. He puts a burden upon you. Now you have a responsibility towards the beauty that He gave you, towards the children that He gave you, towards the wealth that He gave you. You have a responsibility. So He says, مَتَى مَا مَلَّكَنَا, whenever He gives us, it means He's putting upon our shoulders a responsibility. And when He takes it away from us, what happens? It means He's taking the responsibility away. But for the majority of us, what happens when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away the grace? We complain. We complain. Say, why Allah, why are you doing this to me? But Amir al-Mu'minin is saying that when Allah gives you, it means He's putting a responsibility on your shoulders. We look at the Prophet Musa, for example. He says, whenever he saw poverty coming, he says, أهلا بسماء الصالحين. He used to be happy. He says, like, welcome the characteristics of the faithful ones. While when it comes to the grace, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me a lot of grace, we look at Amir al-Mu'minin. Just the night before, the day he was struck on his head, he was breaking his fast at the house of Kulthum, his daughter, and then she brought him the food, a tray that had milk and water and 2 pieces of bread. And then he said to her, more than 2 types of food in one plate. Do you want your father to stand for longer on the day of judgment? What does that mean? Is that a bad thing? No. It means the more you have, the longer you will be asked. You know, there's a lot of things that you will be held accountable for. Where you spent your money, where you spent your breath. You know, like how you spend this breath, because the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't count my life through the days according to the narrations. It's not by days. Like today I'm 1 day old, or like 1 year old, or 10 years old. No, it's the breath. This is the currency that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at. So the ibadah, the first thing, as Imam Sadiq says, that what you own, you don't see that you own it with Allah. You see that it's only Allah's, and Allah gave it to you, and you have a responsibility towards it. He says the second thing, وَلَا يُدَبِّرُ الْعَبْدُ لِنَفْسِهِ تَدْبِيرًا. I don't see that what I achieved in this world is by my own doing. Because I'm intelligent, I'm genius, I'm strong, I was able to achieve these things. I don't see it that way. I see that it's Allah's plan. Allah plans it for me. And I know, that's why Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, why did she say that مَا رَأَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا, I see nothing except beauty? When Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad told her, how did you see what Allah had done to your family? You know, her family were slaughtered in Karbala. The children, the men, the women are being captive and being struck by the whip on their backs and on their hands, you know. And the head of Al-Imam al-Hussein in these days is in front of her, and Yazid is breaking his teeth. And all of that, she says, I see nothing except beauty. Why? Because she knows that this is the planning of Allah. And when Allah plans something, He plans it because He sees this is the best that could happen. And there is a story that I mentioned in Muharram about that lady that came to Prophet Dawood. And she said to him, show me the justice of Allah. Where's the justice of Allah? A lot of people, they start to say, like, how is this just? You know, Allah gave me my child and you're taking it away from me. How is this justice? A lot of people, when they go through hardships, they complain. So she was doing the same. She went to Prophet Dawood, show me the justice of Allah. He said to her, what's happening? What's wrong with you? So she said, my husband died and he left me with 3 kids and I was supposed to provide for them. So I started to bring some threads, silk threads, and make clothes with it and sell it. And with the money that I make, I bring them some food, and with the rest I buy some more threads. And then on this day, that's what I done. I brought these threads, and then a bird came and snatched the threads from my hands and flew away. So show me the justice of Allah. He told her, take this money, buy your threads. She said, no, I want you to show me the justice of Allah. As she was there, 5 tradesmen came to Prophet Dawood and they put 1,000 dinar in front of him. And he asked them, what's the story of this money? They said to him, we are merchants that we sail in the sea. We bring our merchandise in the sea. On this day, like 3 days ago, the mast broke, and the ship stopped in the middle of the sea. And 3 days without food and water, we were starving. So we made a vow to Allah, if He helps us do this trial, we will pay this much to Prophet Dawood. He said, when we made this vow, a bird came and threw these threads in the ship. And then we took these threads, it's silk threads, strong threads, we fixed the mast, we fixed the shira', and now the ship came to the port, and this is the money. We are fulfilling our vow. Then Prophet Dawood looked upon the lady. He said to her, you were complaining about Allah on the land, and He was trading for you in the sea. She didn't see the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what Allah had hid for her was something that is great. Something that wouldn't make her in need of working so hard to provide for her kids. So the second thing, I don't see that what I achieved in this dunya is from my own effort. I see that it's the planning of Allah. Otherwise, I'll be like Qarun. Qarun, the wealthy man who showed himself one of the people with his old decorations. And he says, what I have is through my own knowledge and my own intelligence, my own power. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the earth swallow him. And then he says the third point of the truth of the ibadah is what you are busy with is what only satisfies Allah, and avoiding what angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. جملة اشتغالي مشتغل يعني in every second I'm concerned. Is what I'm doing right now, whether it's work, whether it's playing or whatever I'm doing, does it satisfy Allah or not? The Prophet tells Abu Dhar, he says, Ya Abu Dhar, if you are able to eat and drink for the sake of Allah, then do it. Even if I'm going to drink, I say I'm drinking qurbatan ilallah ta'ala, to seek closeness to Allah. In what sense? In the sense that I'm admitting that this is a grace from Allah, that I'm doing it out of respect to the body that is a grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to keep this body healthy. In everything that I do, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah. I open the door of my car going to work, I do it for the sake of Allah, knowing that a person who goes to work in order to seek accommodation for himself and his family, as the narration says, is like a person who is drenched in his blood fighting with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. It's like a jihad. الكاد على عياله كالمتشحذ بدمه مع رسول الله. The person who works hard for his family. So in everything I can seek closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ibadah, the right of Allah is ibadah. And the third point is to not associate with Allah anyone with the ibadah or anything. And of course this is not something that we are tested with, if we look at it in the common meaning of it. Because when we say shirk, it means I'm worshipping like Christians, or like a person who worships idols with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the shirk that we should be afraid from is the hidden shirk. Is when someone is attached to the dunya and he have the dunya in his heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The narration says that this heart is the sanctuary of Allah. So do not put in the sanctuary of Allah other than Allah. Some people, they love the dunya. Some people, the worship is full of riya, to show off to the people. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. They only pray to show, or they only attend the religious gatherings, or they only share in what is religious, or they pay charity just to see for the people so they can see. Riya, it's like that person who was alone in the masjid and he felt a movement behind him. Everyone knows this story. And he started to worship in a slow way, praise very slowly with tears, And then when he finished, he realized it was a dog that was walking past. but he felt that someone was watching him. Now I have to look that I'm more religious. While the Imam says that the sign of the mura'i, alamatul riya thalath. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, this is something that is very important. Something that we have to always memorize. To know, like, sometimes I'm not doing it on purpose, but it just happens. Imam Sadiq, he says that the sign of riya is when I do my action just for someone to see me, a person, not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says that the sign of riya is three things. When he's alone, he's lazy. When I'm at home, my worship is not the same. My praise is not the same. You know, if I'm playing my game and then my parents, they tell me, leave it, get up and pray. No, let me finish this match. You know, I have still three characters that I have to kill in the game. You know, wait until I finish so I can pray after that. And the second sign, when he's amongst people, his worship is different. The way I pray is different. The way I serve Imam Hussein alayhi salam is different. So being at home, I'm lazy. In front of people, it's different. The third sign, he says, وَيَتَعَرَّضْ فِي كُلِّ أَمْرٍ لِلْمَحْمَدَ. In everything, I want the people to praise me. I'm scavenging for praise. I want the people to say that what I did is good. So it's something that makes me feel better if people praise my actions, or praise what I achieved, or praise what I do in front of them. You know, يَتَعَرَّضْ في three signs of riya. When I'm by myself, I'm lazy. When I'm amongst the people, I'm so active. And then the third is that seeking, praising from the people. While the other narration says, لَيْسَ بِحَكِيمٍ مَنْ رَضِيَ بِمَدْحِ الْجَاهِلِ. He's not wise those who love the praise of the ignorant ones. What does that mean? What does it mean, the ignorant ones? The ignorant ones in this case can be a scholar. In what sense? They're ignorant of your truth. They're ignorant of my truth. Because they don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows from me. They don't know my shortfallings. What they see is the obvious thing. What you are seeing now from me is me giving a lecture about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you don't know if I'm alone at home, I am actually following what I'm saying. So I wouldn't be wise if I accept from you any praise. And I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows me better, and I know myself better. So for the amal to be, the right of Allah, which is ibadah, and the ibadah should be accompanied with not disassociating anything with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam says, if you do this with sincerity, with ikhlas, then you will get the fruit. Ikhlas. What is ikhlas? What is sincerity? After salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ikhlas is 5 levels. Sincerity is 5 levels. The first level and the lowest one is your worship to be empty from riya. Making it just to satisfy the people or to impress the people. This is the lowest status of ibadah. The first level of ikhlas is for your ibadah and for your actions to be empty from riya. The second, the Imam mentions them in one narration. He says, إِنَّ قَوْمًا عَبَدُوا اللَّهَ طَمَعًا فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ التُّجَّارِ. There are people who worships Allah out of greed in heaven. What they want is heaven. I'm just worshipping Allah because I want heaven. This, in fact, this is part of shirk. When I worship Allah and I have with Allah in my heart heaven, but Allah tells you that I accept this ibadah from you. I will give you a reward. Even if you worship me just for the sake of heaven, I will give it to you. I will give you the reward for it. He said there are people who worships Allah out of greed in heaven. That is the worship of the merchants. تلك عبادة التجار. And this is the second level. The third level. And there are people who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of fear. They are afraid of the hellfire. He says that is the worship of the slaves, of the abid. How back then the slaves, there are rules about the slaves. They can't disobey their masters. If they disobey al-abdul abiq, he gets killed. He gets punished. You know? So they worship Allah out of fear, and this is like worshipping Allah out of greed. The fourth level, وَإِنَّ قَوْمًا, they worship Allah out of gratitude. That is the worship of the freemen. تِلْكَ عِبَادَةُ الْأَحْرَارِ. You know, I show gratefulness thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to what He gave me, now I'm considered hur, a free man. And there's the fifth level of ikhlas, which we cannot achieve. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen speaks about. When he speaks to Allah, he says, Ilahi, ma abadtuka khawfan min narik, wala tama'an fi jannatik. I did not worship you out of fear of your hellfire. And I did not worship you, and I do not worship you out of greed in your heaven. But I saw that you deserve to be worshipped, so I worship you. I look that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves to be worshipped. Ahl al-ibadah. Even if He doesn't give me anything in the dunya. Even if I am living the most miserable life in the dunya, I still have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 5 levels. I have to understand which level I have and to try to elevate. Try to make my worship better. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the Imam says if you do this out of sincerity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it binding upon Himself to give you sufficiency, not only in the hereafter. Because we all understand that if you pray, you will get heaven. If you pray, you will get the levels in the day of judgment. But the Imam says, Allah will make it binding upon Himself to give you sufficiency in the affairs of the dunya as well. Of this dunya. Whatever you need. That's what the narration says, that if you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself says in the divine hadith, He says, Abd, if you obey me, if the servant obeys me, I will become his eye that he sees through. I will become his tongue that he speaks through. I will become his ears and I will become his hands. You know? What does that mean? If I look through the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means I have foresight. I have basira. Every decision I make it depending on something that is wise. Something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps me to see the truth behind everything. That's why the hadith says, ittaqu farasat al-mu'min. Be wary or be aware of the farasa of the mu'min. It means the basira, the foresight of the mu'min. Because he sees through the eyes of Allah. That's why some people, like the farasa, what does that mean? Farasa is like the pharmacist, the pharmacist, when he's too experienced, a person, he can know what's wrong with you from the sound of a cough. He looks at your face, how the color, how pale your face is, he can tell what's wrong with you and he can give you the proper medicine for it. There's farasa there. The mu'min becomes like he has a farasa. It means I see a person, without even talking to him, I can understand the truth of this person. Should I avoid this person or not? And the minimum of the farasa that I can have is that when I only gather with the people who remind me of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I avoid those people who are sinful. This is the minimum level of farasa, of having a foresight. وَيَدُهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes my eyes, my ears, my hands, my tongue. When I give an advice, I want to raise my children, I want to give an advice to my friend, it's always fruitful because what I say is going to be the solution to the issues of myself and the people that surround me. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullahi wa salam alayhi teaches you and teaches me that ibadah and worship, it is actually something that you should do that is logical towards the Creator, towards the one who gave you all these graces. And worship is not limited to staying on your prayer mat. Worship can be done through every action that I do, through the breaths that I take, through the words that I speak, through the places that I attend to. It's considered worship. The intention that I use, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is worship. And we can tell the status of the ikhlas and the iman in our heart. How? Through the salat, through the praise. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, as the Quran says, the verses that Amir al-Mu'mineen said when he was first born. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. The successful, the victorious ones of the mu'mineen, those who have khushu', they concentrate in the praise. How much khushu' I have, that's how I know how sincere I am. Ruh al-Iman. There's a spirit of the Iman in each person. How strong this spirit. The stronger the spirit is, the shaitan is further. There is that man, a story of a man who lost his passport. And he was about to travel in a few days. He went to a Sheikh. He said to him, please help me. Tell me about something that I can do in order to retrieve what I lost. So the Sheikh told him, well, tonight don't sleep. Pray until the Fajr and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you. You know, because the shaitan, the most thing that he hates is when you pray. The narration says that when the mu'min stands up to pray, the shayateen will gather around him like the wasps around the meat to stop you from praying. So this person, what he done? He, after midnight, he stood up to pray. The first rak'ah, he remembered where he put the passport. What do you think? Would he continue his prayers until the morning? No, he didn't continue. And he went to sleep. The next day he went to the Sheikh and said, look, thank you for the advice. Allah helped me to find my passport. He said, no, that's not Allah. That was the shaitan. The shaitan reminded you. Not because he didn't stand the fact that you are going to pray until the morning. So what he done to avoid, because every time the abd prays, the shaitan hits his forehead. He says, Waili, asaytu wa ata. I disobeyed and he obeyed. So it is important for us to try to realize what status of ikhlas we have. Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullah wa salam, it is true that after Karbala he wasn't able to speak freely. But there is one thing that they didn't go silent about. It's the ma'rifah of Ma'soom. Ma'rifat Ahlul Bayt. Knowing Ahlul Bayt. That's why even the tyrant, they were planning to kill Ahlul Bayt one after one. Imam Zayn al-Abidin would ask a person who used to work with the tyrant, he said to him, where is your people taking the religion from? He said to him, left and right, yaminan wa shimalan. He said, then invite them to me. Tell them to come to me. To go to the Ma'soom. And now, these days, there is a Eid, was at the time of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. They called it Eid al-Sham. The celebration of al-Sham, Eid al-Sham. Why was it a Eid? Imam Zayn al-Abidin, when he was asked, what was the greatest tragedy upon your heart? He said 3 times. He said, al-Sham, al-Sham, al-Sham. What happened in Syria, in al-Sham, was great. Why? Because they closed the markets. Because it was a celebration for them. And they decorated the streets. The heads were on the top of the spee. And the people were dancing and singing and hitting the drums. And what happened in Asham was that the head of Al-Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi was struck by the stick of Yazid, breaking his teeth. And what made it harder upon Al-Imam Zayn al-Abidin is a man told Yazid that I want to buy Sukaina so she can be my servant, my slave. They were humiliated. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Ajjallah ta'ala farajahu sharif, and to grant us the tawfiq to avenge and seek revenge of Al-Imam Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi from the Zalimeen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us our needs in this dunya and the highest of status in the day of judgment. Innahu sami'un mujib. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon the souls of the deceased of Shi'at Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, ولقضاء الحوائج وشفاء المرضى ولقبول الأعمال ولتعجيل الفرج ولأرواح أموات المؤمنين والمؤمنات. نهدي للثواب ما قرأنا والثواب المباركة. الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.